Hey, what are you looking at?
A community blighted by gangs of troublemaking drunken youths.
They would sit on your cars, they would swear at you, they would say they would do things to me sexually.
An ordinary man on an ordinary street on what began as an ordinary summer's evening.
I never imagined that to happen to anyone. You hear it on the news all the time and you see it in newspapers, but you never think it's going to happen to you.
A father beaten to death in front of his 3 young daughters. The murder of Garry Newlove outside his home in August 2007 was one of those crimes that shock people to the core, that provoke soul-searching and questions about what sort of nation we'd become. Tonight, his wife and daughters speak in detail for the first time about what happened that fateful night. For many, the brutal murder of Garry Newlove was simply a reflection of Britain's broken society. After months of escalating, drink-fuelled, antisocial behaviour in the area, a gang of drunken youths had taken the life of a devoted father. This is the story of a family's devastating loss and their remarkable response to it. Warrington lies in the northwest of England, between the cities of Manchester and Liverpool. With a population of around 200,000, it is much like any other town in Britain. Garry and Helen Newlove and their 3 daughters moved to this house on Station Road in the Fernhead area of the town in 2004. It was a place where residents took pride in their homes, somewhere people wanted to live.
What was the area like that you were living in?
It was the old-fashioned area. You know, it was just a normal residential area that you knew your neighbours. So it was a really nice family feel about it.
I knew Fernhead fairly well. It's a nice area. It's the kind of area you might want to live. It's the kind of area you'd want to bring up children. Garry and Helen had a fairly nice house on what looked like a nice street, but it turned out that that area had had its problems before.
Well, really, the problems in Warrington weren't terribly different from lots of other places in Cheshire and indeed other parts of the country in terms of the problem of youngsters, young males drinking too much and then indulging in antisocial behaviour and damage after they'd been drinking.
There was an underpass barely 10 metres from the Newloves' front door, which had become a place where teenagers would gather to drink and mess about. 3 friends, Adam Swellings, Stephen Sawton and Jordan Cunliffe, would often be among them.
I think the vast majority was groups of youngsters gathering together, drinking alcohol, becoming drunk, and then on the way back they headed down Station Road, and that's when some of the problems arose for not just the Newlove family but other residents within that area.
They would sit on your cars, they would swear at you, they would say they would do things to me sexually, and you know, to have to keep Garry from going out there because there was always that fear factor that, you know, you'd end up being in trouble, to be perfectly honest. It'd end up that you were in problems.
You couldn't really go down the street without seeing like a gang of kids, but they just didn't care. They'd hang around in shop corners, they'd just sit on people's cars and they'd be everywhere, so you know they're up to no good, and they'd even vandalise something right in front of your eyes.
Was Garry himself worried? Did he say to you, look, we should move, or was he concerned about what might happen?
He was sick and tired of weekends, having to go to the front door, look out if your car was fine. Sick of coming out on a Saturday or Sunday when you're doing your gardens and having bags full of litter of cans of lager. There was a guy one day who was actually urinating up the fence, and Garry said, "What do you think you're doing? I've got, 3 young daughters here and you just get verbal abuse." So yes, it come to a stage where we said, look, we really need to get away from here.
That's bad sick, mate.
Local residents did complain to the police, sometimes leading to an increase in patrols, but they felt there was no sustained attempt made to tackle the problem.
Every Friday and Saturday night we didn't feel safe at all. There was always vandalising, making so much noise under the subway, vandalising cars, just throwing litter everywhere. They just didn't really care about where people lived, they just wanted to do their own thing, thinking it was okay.
Were people in the neighbourhood scared of them? Were you scared of them?
I wouldn't want to go out at night, past 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I wouldn't want to walk underneath the subway because, they would try and torture you, insult you, whatever. And I think that's how everybody felt in the neighbourhood. I think they were just a nuisance and they were in the way.
Gangs are an issue that affect many people, not just on rough council estates, but on every estate in this country. Kids that roam and cause problems, and people don't know what to do about it. On this estate, there was a real sense that people were helpless. They would call the police, perhaps about kids throwing stones through windows, and they'd be told, it's not an emergency.
Howard and Christine Malone live just a few doors down from the Newlove house. They have lived here for many years and had seen drunken behaviour becoming more and more of a problem.
It was quite common. You'd get groups going past. Sometimes there was no problem whatsoever. And other times it was just the opposite. They were drunk and under the influence of drugs. And anything could happen.
When the low-level abuse escalated to a brick thrown through their window, the Malones took the dramatic step of getting CCTV cameras fitted to the front of their home.
As I say, it was horrific. At the end of the day, there could have been a fatality. The whole room was covered in glass. Christine was hysterical. The incidents that were going on in Station Road were continuous. You could say every 3 months that something was going to happen, and it did.
Was it building up? Were there more of these gangs around? Did you sense that it was getting worse?
Since the day that we moved in, it definitely, in general, there was more gangs walking through. It wasn't always them drinking at first, but then you did notice that it was then always the case they always had alcohol on them.
My wife said for years, somebody will get murdered on Station Road before long. Because, as I say, it was a regular occurrence, and it was a matter of, not if it will happen, it was a matter of when it will happen.
The community was being victimised by a group of youths drinking and causing trouble week after week. Cars were vandalised, graffiti sprayed, residents shouted at, and on occasion assaulted. But no one could have imagined how far things would go.
I honestly didn't think it would happen in our area. I mean, I am very aware now that this kind of thing happens in every area, no matter if it's a bad or good area. You hear about it, knife crime all the time and things like that, and you just don't expect it to happen, do you?
But it was about to happen, and to a hard-working family man with 3 daughters, aged 12, 15 and 18.
He was very, very loving father, loved his children dearly, very hard-working.
So he was a real family man, was he?
Oh yeah, very, very much so. Very family unit. Definitely wasn't one that would go out with the lads or anything. He did it occasionally, but nothing. He preferred to be at home.
Life hadn't always been easy for the Newlove family. When he was 32, Garry was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and although the cancer had gone, it was a long battle back to health.
He lost 8.5 stone in a week when he first had it, and then learned to eat. He carried on working. He never, claimed or anything. He still wanted to provide for his family, and I truly admired him for that.
So give us an idea of what your dad was like.
Sum it up really by saying he was my best friend. I could tell him anything. We were a really close family. We still are a close family. Told my mum and dad absolutely everything. Yeah, no, he was my best friend, and that's all I can say really. Just best guy ever.
Coming up, for the first time, in their own words, Garry's family talk in detail about what they saw that night.
I just couldn't believe that my dad was in that state that I saw. He was just full in blood and his head was just smashed up. I've never seen. I couldn't even think how people could even do that to my dad. He's just unbelievable.
In the summer of 2007, the residents of this street were being plagued by gangs of drunken youths. But from incessant petty vandalism, the antisocial behaviour was about to escalate to murder. Here for the first time, the family of Garry Newlove relive in detail the events of that summer's night. A night that was to change their lives forever.
On the Friday, I'd actually been working and come home early because I wasn't feeling very well, 100%. And so Garry used to make really good chucky eggs, as we used to call them. And so he did me a chucky egg and some soldiers. And I decided to go up to bed because I didn't feel very well at all.
On the night of the attack, what were you doing?
I was working at IKEA and my boyfriend Tom picked me up. Came in and it was around 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Hey, Dad.
Hiya, do you have a good day at work?
I went into the living room and my dad was on his laptop and I asked him if there was any food left from tea, and they'd had like a Chinese takeaway. And then I went into the kitchen to put some into the microwave to warm up for my tea and just sat there with Tom eating it. Just like a normal night after work, really.
I came home from school. I can't remember like the early day because it was mostly the night I remember. But I remember sitting in my bed and reading my book. Mum had been ill that night, so I just really kept to myself. So it was just an ordinary night, just thinking it was like last weekend. Nothing seemed different at all.
At around 10:30 p.m, the family were settled inside the house, a normal Friday night.
You'd heard noise, which was usual, but then we'd heard glass being smashed, which kind of then you kind of heckles go up and thinking, oh God, what have they done now? And then I heard a thud against my car, and that's when I thought there's something really going on that's not, they're attacking my car again. I'd already had a broken windscreen mirror, so I really didn't want to what they're doing again.
Garry, can you see what's happening?
And literally, as I'm shouting Garry downstairs, could you just go and check? My daughter Amy runs down with her dad as well, and he said, yeah, I'll go and check them. He ran out barefooted, just had shorts on. It was a summer's night.
They've done it again.
And never thought anything of it, to be perfectly honest.
I just thought, it's just another gang going past, it'll be nothing. So I just stayed in the kitchen.
Dad, just leave it.
I'm fed up.
I looked at him and he looked like annoyed, as you would be if someone had just damaged your property. And then I went out to go grab him, but he'd already started walking off. Dad, what are you doing? I had like a feeling in my stomach where where something's going to happen, but you just ignore it because it's like nothing really could happen now because there's no danger.
From the point where Amy went out, I thought something's going on, so I followed them out, as did Danielle.
Amy, what's happening? I don't know.
What's going on?
Dad!
Something didn't feel right. It wasn't the same as every other occasion. If my dad's gone outside to check on his car or whatever.
Who are you lads?
Zoe and boyfriend Tom looked on as Garry approached the gang of youths.
Say that we got before I knock it off, yeah? Take your teeth out before I knock them out.
At that point, he must have been around where we stood now. Then obviously I come out the road as well. And from that point, obviously, we just basically watching to see whether he'd come back.
Garry had gone to remonstrate with the gang. His approach was caught on the CCTV recently fitted at their neighbour's house. It shows the gang moments before they attacked.
The gang stopped and then started walking back towards my dad, and then they formed like a semicircle shape.
Come on, Dad, just leave it.
My dad didn't raise his voice once. He was relatively calm considering how many times it's happened. And then one guy hit my dad, and then they all started hitting my dad. So, yeah, kind of all happened so fast.
All of a sudden he was like surrounded, and then someone had come from the back to the back of him, and kneed him in the back because he had a sore back. He obviously fell down, and then that's when I started to run. And by the time I got there, and when I was running, they were all kicking him and everything.
Come on!
He got punched, got hit as well, and then he went down. And at that point he went down. Obviously, I actually ran up there, obviously followed by Amy and Danielle at that point as well, and Zoe.
They were like a pack of animals, kicked my dad from behind. My dad fell to the floor, and you think, my dad's on the floor now, they'll stop. And, you know, they've had the fun, but they carried on kicking my dad.